The year is 2010. You boot up Shadow of Chernobyl or Clear Sky for the very first time. You run into a merchant in a bunker, some fat old guy, but you continue on your way. If you decide to revisit later with vanilla mods like Oblivion Lost Remake, you'll understand that this was actually a totally different version of Sidorovich. The one we see in Oblivion Lost is named Toad and has a few major differences. Sidorovich seems a bit older than Toad. Toad actually has hair, for example, a missing limb, but interestingly enough, both of them remain underground, just like the 100 Rads bar itself remains a little underground in both renditions. To shift focus from Sidorovich to the bar, and rather Barkeep himself, he went through a bit of changes too, as well as the bar, but I'd rather like to focus on the NPCs this time. Of course, the version of Barkeep we all know and love looks a lot more finished than the older, rougher version. In both renditions, there's bar guards. And I suppose at some point along the line, there was the idea to add Wolf into the Rookie Village to protect the rookies, as well as the idea of Rookie Village itself become more and more developed. As we can see from Shadow of Chernobyl and Clear Sky, GSC likes to play around a bit. For example, you couldn't go to Restock in Clear Sky because they said it was blocked off. That's the most notable thing I can give you right now, but there's a ton of these. To put it better into perspective would be to say that everything is more fluid and subject to change. If you care to take a closer look at the NPCs in all of the games, you might find yourself asking the question, who is or who are the NPCs that make it through all three games? And you'll be surprised to find that there are actually quite a few. Of all those present, I would say Nimble is the most recognizable, the most famous. And going back to the GSC playing around thing, they like to introduce character development throughout these years. They like to switch NPCs from different factions as the game goes on. For example, Nimble being in Clear Sky, then he becomes a loner, and then he becomes a merchant in Call of Pripyat selling goods to you, having his own market. This kind of piggybacks off of the idea that they never have the same player character be in the same faction. It's always you're a loner in this game, you're a merc in this game, and you're military in this game, which makes me wonder what will be in Stalker 2. The point is, they honor variety. They want flexibility, diversity. So naturally, you'll see this come across through character development. Sometimes it might be more subjective than objective, but we will still see some major physical changes, like Sidorovich and Toad, and Barkeep, those being the more recognizable famous examples. If you go back to the original Oblivion Lost from 2002 for a moment, we actually started from two NPCs all by themselves. Not even NPCs, actually. They were controllable, so they weren't NPCs, but they were supposed to be a male and female character that the player could control. There was a handful of guns, a handful of enemies, but we went on from there. To now, we have factions, we have groups within those factions, and we have named characters. One of the living legends, shall we say, Tejas Stalker, weighed in on this a little. He too noticed that GSC plays around with their NPCs a little. In particular, the named ones, the ones that stick out, that have odd names. He notes that in between games, GSC will have them do things, go to different areas, be different people, really. So it's not just the merchants, it's not just Nimble, Sidorovich, Barkeep. It's almost every named stalker that sticks out that isn't just RNG, shall we say, like the first name, last name. If their name is usually an adjective or a noun, or it just sticks out to you a little bit, chances are they had something to do with it. And whatever the reason may be, they continue having something to do with it, changing the majority of these characters throughout their games, even if the player themselves doesn't really notice or care. It's only really visible to the long-term players, again, like Tejas, who notices stuff like this because he maps out dog routes and sits in the back of a truck for fucking weeks on end. It's an attention to detail that is astounding. A level of care that is almost unmatched. If you were to say, oh, well, why would they do this? What is the point? It would again go back to character development. They want to flesh out these named characters. They can't do so for the regular stalkers. They don't have actual names because those are just meant to run around and die and become part of the game. These other ones are meant to be more lore building. They're meant to be in the background. They're not meant to really die, although some of them can. But for the most part, they like to keep them, shuffle them around. They like to keep them as part of the atmosphere, as part of the world. It's important to note that this happens for just about everyone. Every entity that isn't an NPC, every entity that is named and not RNG, they will try to work with. It's very interesting to consider everything that comes into this. I haven't really heard much about Call of Pripyat, but to go back to the bar in Sidorovich's bunker for the millionth time, they knew that they wanted these places as sort of bunkers for some reason. They had a rough sketch of what they wanted, and they worked on it and worked on it until it became something more feasible. Stuff like this is just so amazing, so entertaining to me that I feel like I have to mention it. And from the little cutscenes in Stalker 2 that we've seen so far, it seems that GSC is just going to go further with their characters. Here's hoping they do. If I missed anything, if there's anything you wish to comment on, add to the story, please do so.